good. There he is. Okay, let's get started. Welcome to TAPS. If you want to see and hear, you can sit anywhere. If you want to be seen and be heard, you should probably sit on this side of the room. Is that on? Is this on? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. That wasn't me. Just saying. Yeah. Okay, welcome to TAPS. I'm Aaron Falk. I'm the TAPS Working Group Chair. We have, I think, 90 minutes? No, we have 2 hours. Ken Calvert is taking minutes, so please, if you don't know Ken personally, don't assume that he knows your name, and try to speak clearly enough so that he can get it into the record if you have something to share. Would somebody like to volunteer to channel the Jabber Room? Thank you, Joe. The blue sheets are going around. Please make a point of signing the blue sheets. This is the now familiar Note Well sign. The thing to take away from this, in case you haven't gotten it yet, is that anything that you say in an IETF meeting or post to an IETF mailing list is considered an IETF contribution, and you have given it to the community. So thank you, and thank you for your participation. This is the first half of today's agenda. I've got these slides, a few bits of administrivia. The most important item in my mind is trying to figure out a plan to get to closure on the first document, of which we've spent a lot of time, and I think it's progressed a lot in sort of getting converging. So I've been talking with Miria, Brian, and Gori about a plan for that, and they have a schedule for that. There are a few holes in the document, placeholders. We want to find out if there are any additional placeholders that we should put in there, since at this point we are heading towards the finish line, and so we should talk about that. Miria, are you going to do the talking? Brian's going to do the talking about reviewing the document and discussion on how some of the refactorization of the components, and try to get some feedback on that, and whether there's any strong enough objections that we should do a reset. Second half is really substantive discussions on a couple of topics. One is this idea of protocols, the features, and what we put in the current document, what we should put in the next document, and maybe what isn't appropriate for either documents. And I think, Brian, are you going to lead that one as well? Okay, I didn't think that was going to be a surprise. I made the questions into a slide, and maybe you can just say the first provocative thing and sit down, and then that'll be the end of it. Yeah, okay. And then there's been a lot of discussion on the mailing list about interfaces and their relationship to what we're trying to do in this working group. Brian, I'm sorry, it's the second time I've done it. Michael Welzel is going to give a short discussion to sort of kick off some open mic time on that, so we can see if we can get to some convergence on there. Did I hear somebody want to say something? Okay, never mind. So here's the schedule. We have, if you look at the left-hand column, we were supposed to submit this document in June, and that was what we proposed in the charter, so we clearly slipped. I would like to propose that we, so you'll see a schedule, sort of a detailed schedule on editorial schedule on the document to get us to submitting it to the ISG by the end of the year. I think an important step, we can't wait until, Here. Can't wait till the next time you're at the plenary. Yes, Michael.
Yes. Okay. So I think it's an obvious and obvious concern for a lot of people to have that TAPS is an academic exercise and will just end with a useless list and another useless list and then some description of how you could use these useless lists to do something useless. And I'm very concerned that if we don't give it the time it needs, that's the outcome. So this is not when I say the time it needs, I mean, you're talking about the original schedule, so the schedule is what it is, and I mean, sure we should, try to keep with it if possible, but my point is, I think this is a situation where it's much more important to get it right than to get it quick.
So I don't disagree with that at all. My observation, though, is the discussion takes on a tempo that is driven by the IETF meeting schedule, and there is it's a very low duty cycle. Everybody when they leave here on Saturday is going to go to sleep for probably a month or 6 weeks, right? And that's what always happens. I don't want it to be 4 months, right? So I want to pick up the schedule. I am totally open to, so what I want to do is we know there's a set of things that, we're going to talk about today, about a set of topics. Hopefully what will come out of that will be some changes, some text that needs to be written, some stuff like that. Let's do that. Turn that crank. We'll see where we are then. And if we need to extend things after that point, that's fine. I'm not going to just sort of push the document out if it's not useful. I mean, the question is going to be, have we achieved our goal ultimately?
I think we had very useful discussion over the last months, and we as the author team also didn't do as much as we could have done because we've been busy with other stuff. But we really think that we can.
And that's over. No, all your other stuff is done now,
yes,
right?
Completely.
Okay, good.
Only, yeah.
Thank you.
No, but we do have some cycles to put some work in the document right now. So I think it's doable. I mean, if you think that the current state of the document is not pointing to the right direction, then we should discuss it. Okay. So, but that's at the end of the agenda. Let's discuss it later on. Okay.
Okay. So the concrete point that I wanted to get to on this slide is that I am proposing an interim call to review the document on, I think, September 30th. It's on the schedule that when we get to the document schedule. It's like the September 29th to 30th. 2-hour call to have a discussion on the rev of the document that exists then. So I want you all to take out your Google calendars or Outlook calendars or whatever it is. See if that is, if you have such strong feelings that you want to have a discussion about those dates. Because my experience is that sometimes you can have a much faster convergence on scheduling face-to-face than over email. All right, we're there. Michael. Oh, okay. Joe.
Joe Hildebrand, if you need me to schedule you a WebEx, just shoot me up.
I will do so. That's exactly what I was thinking. Goring. Is it the 29th? Okay, we're going to talk about the document schedule, and that will answer that question, and then we'll revisit this. But I would like to get a sense of the room about whether on a particular date, so that we don't try to have a scheduling discussion on email because I hate those; they never converge. Okay, so we'll talk about that when we talk about the document schedule, so people understand what's going to be there then. Okay. So that's all for the administrivia. So let's go to the first agenda item. Oh, look at that. Window's way over there. Oh, this is going to be bad. hold on. And that's over there too. Oh.
Brown Fox pushes the red button on the bottom of the mic. I understand from this morning's plenary presentation that when you stray from the pink box, things get kinetic. So I'm going to try very hard not to die.
Anybody not signed the blue sheet? Two in front, Dave. One here, one there. Okay, go ahead, Brian.
It's in slideshow mode, so.
Oh, good. Are we done?
It does that automatically. We're done. Woo! Okay, don't hit play. Don't hit play. Don't hit play. Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, actually, we don't really, we know what the document is. We know who we are. We can move on, I think. So we've had 3 revs since the last time we talked about this. We added text on norm, TLS, DTLS, HTTP. And then at that point, we had enough of the transport subsections that we basically took the feature list from each transport subsection, we copied and pasted them and made. I mean, it was the dumbest possible merge just to see where we were, right? We added text on MPTCP, and then more input on TLS and DTLS. Thank you very much to Brian Adamson, Ralph Holtz, Olivier Mehani, Dragana Damjanovic, and Simone Fernan Oliveira, and Kevin Fall. So we had a look at sort of what happened after we took these feature lists and we put them together, and we had a look at TCP in particular, and we said, this doesn't seem like it's super useful. This seems like it's kind of like and Michael's going to disagree with me when I point out that we were trying to fix the problem that Michael thought the document had. That, okay, we're just going to list the things that we elicited, and we don't really get any deep insight from that. What if we actually, let's revisit what we mean when we say component. And the component then is actually we have a definition on that on the next slide, I believe. Oh, no, I'm doing this whole thing all completely backward. Let's go back.
Start at the end and go forward?
No. I'll do it the way that the slides say we should do it. It's Thursday. So we basically went and we revisited how TCP looks, and we're going to have a discussion later about does that decomposition make sense for the other protocols? But we wanted this list to be something that actually sort of like captured useful properties of these transport protocols as guidance moving forward. We have a little bit of input missing. Varun. Hi. And we're going to set a deadline right now.
Just
for the
opening
31st.
my calendar.
Huh?
I was just opening my
Okay.
calendar.
For the 31st of August, 2015. We had text on RTP from Varun, and I've already twisted Varun's arm at least once, and I think your arm has been twisted multiple times. I think it's amazing that you're here holding your laptop with 2 arms. And so Salvatore Loreto, are you here, Salvatore? Sylvester, where's Salvatore? Okay. Find him and bring him to me. And then also from the output of the discussion we had about interfaces, or the thread on interfaces, we wanted to get some text on interfaces and APIs described in the RFCs. So Karen, I know, had talked a bit about the SCTP stiff, and I think you've already sort of volunteered, yes?
I have already provided some text, and then we'll see what is missing together.
Cool, excellent.
And we need some text which we can follow. So if you present us the text for TCP and say, how does it look like for SCTP, we can provide this.
Yeah, cool. So for SCTP, the text, there's much more documentation about how the interface look like. So we would actually like to go with the SCTP description, have it first.
We'd like you guys to lead.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to try to brief as possible. Basically, what we want is a pointers to the right documents and just know where what is described. You don't have to describe the full interface.
Yeah. Yes.
I actually suspect that a discussion of interfaces will happen at the end of the meeting because we have an agenda item for it.
Yeah, the discussion of interfaces will happen, and then we should actually talk offline after that. But there's a marker set down in the text for text and interfaces goes here. Okay, Varun.
So are you done with this slide, or is there more stuff on RTP, or this is
No,
just
this
the
is
call to action?
This is the point at which you should jump in and say,
Yeah,
"Here,
so-
sorry."
So I think I volunteered to write it in Honolulu or somewhere. So I apologize that I missed several calls to action. Yeah, I'll try to get this done.
People get
soon.
busy.
Yeah, but I think I tried to write it twice, and I didn't spend more than 10 minutes at it. But the main problem I have is the fact that the scope of RTP is quite large, and I don't know how to, like, what's the intention?
So the point of the document isn't to, unless Gori, you want to make a point on that.
Let me remind people to please say your name for the minutes ticker. Make his life easy so he does it again.
I'm Gori First.
Very good.
I'm I'm part of this mission. I have a vision about what RTP text I might like. And it might not be the same as my core editors, but I will say what I think I like. I'd like to see not a description of how RTP can solve multiple problems in multiple ways, because it can, and that's useful. And I also don't particularly want to see a description about how RTP integrates with apps and codecs. That's useful as well, but it's not so helpful to me here. What really helps me when I'm looking at this document is a description of what RTP needs from the transports. In other words, how does it use transports? Does it want low delay? Does it want retransmission? I mean, what sort of things does RTP run over? And we know that there are multiple things in this space. That text would be really helpful.
So Varun again. So that's like asking what the header already indicates, the RTP header, right? That's pretty much because it's sequence numbers, timestamps, and it can do FEC, and it can accept reordering, and if there's packet loss, it can indicate it. So there's retransmission.
That's pretty much it. Take that.
That's it.
Ken will set you up with the text that you just wrote.
Actually, Varun, you might look at the TLS text, which takes sort of a similar approach of this is something that is a sort of transporty and uses transport protocols underneath it, and this is what it expects.
Okay, if this is what everyone wants,
that's what we want.
This paragraph will come.
And so Gori put a disclaimer on what he wanted, and it's, I don't know if it's what Mary wants, but it's what I want too. So. And it seems to be what the working group wants, so let's do that.
Well, but let me just extend it a little bit because these things are also stackable, right? It also, it has some function, right, to stuff that goes on top of it. And I think you need to say something about the function of things that look at it like a transport protocol.
And I think the outcome of the interfaces discussion a little bit later today might provide some clarity on exactly how that stacking should look.
Yeah, and again, the TLS text I think is a good model for that.
Yeah.
So, Richard Scheffenegger here. One short observation. So, I'm not sure if you want to discuss timestamps or if you want to have two different counters for both the data sequence and the segment sequence, as we have seen in Quick. Just to think about, because the semantics between timestamps and the other one is different, and you can achieve different goals.
Okay. Yeah, well, I think the text on DCCP talks about that because DCCP offers that, but TCP doesn't, so we wouldn't put it in TCP. So.
Right.
Good.
Everybody's back in their corners. Carry on.
Okay. Round 3.
Next slide.
Yeah.
Oh, Philly.
Mirja Kühlewind again. So on the last point, we try to put some a little text on interfaces in the document. So if you have an idea where you would like to see more text on interfaces, send it to us. But this is also for the deadline of the 31st of August. So any text and interface we will have until this deadline, we will put in the document. Any text we don't have, we either make up something or there's no text.
Again, we have an agenda item to talk about interfaces.
Actually, can we skip 2 slides ahead now? So this is the schedule that we're looking at. So basically, August 31st, we want to be basically text complete. And then what the editors will do is between then and the 29th of September, hopefully long between the 29th of September. So this is the proposed call, which actually it turns out I have a conflict for. I was informed by Joe. So whenever the interim is sort of toward the end of September, we'll take those 3 weeks to edit that together and have a coherently edited together document that people will have had a chance to read before this call. If there's review that comes out of that call, all of that gets incorporated to another revision before the cutoff for October 19th, and then basically we'd start the working group last call between then and the next meeting. So we'd basically be coming into Yokohama with the ability to discuss the documents other than this one in Yokohama. That is the intention of this schedule.
Karen, did you have something?
Yeah, I'm sorry if I haven't paid close enough attention to the discussion, so please cut me off if I'm repeating what you've already said. This document that you'll have in the end of August, will it address the issue that we're not really using a common terminology for the transport services in between the different sections?
Please go to the previous slide. Thank you for the segue.
I think the answer to your question is that's the intention.
That's the intention, but we need now everybody get up in the mic lines. Yeah. So Karen, you can keep your spot in the mic line if you want it. So we had this 2-hour discussion in Honolulu, which was an excellent test of the remote participation facilities to me. They worked actually pretty well, about how we were going to talk about the differences between the services that were implemented on top of transport protocols and the things that we already had from transport protocols. And I remember thinking this, I might not have said it because it was low bandwidth connection, that you had sort of like the platonic cave, right? Like the real is the components that you're dealing with, and the ideal is the features, right? And we kind of built a little bit of terminology based on this and then saw what sort of text we got for transport protocol components. And the transport protocol components that came out of this discussion looked actually to us kind of like features. So we went back to this, and what we propose as sort of the split is a component is what is implemented by a specific transport protocol that might be of interest for an application or might influence the operation of an application or might influence the performance of an application. So the application relevant, and I hate to go back to a term that we decided not to use, aspects of that protocol. And actually, I think I'll ask you after this to then jump over to the document text. Well, I don't know if you have a 2-screen thing so you can make that happen. Whereas a feature is what should an application be able to control, or what information should the application be able to get from the transport service. A feature is a knob, or it's a meter, or it's some sort of event interface of, hey, you got a packet. It's something that's application visible, sort of in this final vision of TAPS, where you just have an interface on top of all of these things that is going to meet the requirements that you put into it, without you having to worry about the details of the interface. So we'll need that a little bigger. And what we want to look at is we want to look at the TCP section. So we want to look at Transport Protocol Component Section 313. So when we're thinking about what are the bits of the protocol for TCP that are actually components, what are these bits that have application relevant behaviors? No, application relevant features are components. Things that might have an impact on the application are components, right? Like, so for example, a component of UDP would be something like you get unreliable datagram oriented delivery, and the outcome of that on the application is you do a write to a UDP socket, and what you do on the write to the UDP socket might not come out the other side, or it might come out in some different order. So the application relevant component for TCP is this connection-oriented bidirectional communication with single stream-oriented transmission, and somewhere in here there's a single stream-oriented transmission, stream-oriented meaning we have a stream and the stream is reliable.
It's possible this text needs to be a little bit bigger.
Yeah, so we can go through these one at a time.
So Kevin Fall, CMU,
Yeah.
I wrote the ADP part. That was a good choice. This terminology is making my head bend a little bit. Features to me are things that are like characteristics, and components are the things inside.
Right.
Like for example, I implement a token bucket filter, and that is my mechanism. That is a component. But its purpose is to do some rate flow control, and that would be its feature.
Okay, so that's
I see that very different from what
that's
you just
kind
said.
of what we're trying to do here.
That's what I thought they were trying to do.
That's
too.
what we're trying to do.
But I thought what you just said was totally the opposite.
Okay, that's entirely possible. That's not the intent. Okay, no, Kevin, please stay up and let's answer that.
I thought Brian said the opposite, and I thought I was trying to do what Brian said just now he was trying to do. So we're obviously not quite clear yet. But I think we're just lacking vocabulary.
Right.
So
yes, it's easily fixable.
Okay. So Brian, why don't you just pretend you haven't said anything? Take a deep breath, clear your mind, and try again.
But stay in the box.
And then we probably agree with you. So what is a feature? Who are you asking? Are we clear?
Anna Bernström, the definition you put up now was different from the one in the document,
It's
right?
different from the one in the document.
So I think the one in the document is kind of conforming.
Actually, can we
with
go
what
back to the
you
one
were
in the
saying.
document, since we're in the document?
Yeah, it's completely different, right? Because
Okay. Miri, do you want to say that to Mike? The intention was not to change the definition because we had about 2 hours of discussion to get.
Can you guys read this in the back?
A transport protocol component, the implementation of a transport service feature within a protocol. Yes.
Say,
We still agree with this.
Mia Kulevin. So what's written on the slide, the intention, so we don't want to change the definition. What was written on the slide is not a new definition. It was just the intention to phrase the question. It's not said that you want to redefine it. Nobody wants to redefine it. No.
I want to redefine it.
Can you put up the slide again?
Oh, for Pete's sake, you guys.
Sorry.
That was like one button, Aaron. It wasn't that bad.
The idea of this slide was not to redefine anything. We want to keep the definition we have. The idea of the slide was because actually if you try to write down the document, the line is not always that clear, especially in TCP. The line is very blurry. And so our intention of this slide was the question we ask ourselves every time we write it down something. You know, is this something when we wrote down the component description, which you have right now in the document, and that's open to discussion, this is on the right level. We asked ourselves, is this something that is somehow has an impact on the application? We try to give the thing that is implemented a name, but we still only wanted to list those things which have some kind of impact on the application. And then, and Kevin Fall is not in. I have to put this in the in the minutes in the record. Yeah.
Let the minutes show Kevin Fall nodded.
Kevin Fall nodded. Yes. Okay. So basically, what we realized and what's different about this from the way that it's defined in the terminology, the only difference that we think we're capturing here, and maybe this language is wrong, but yeah.
I have a feeling we're actually in total agreement at this moment.
Yeah, exactly.
But what you had said.
Yeah. Okay.
Strike it from
not delete.
Yeah. What the document says,
Yes.
or what this slide says.
Okay, we'll correct the
Then
record.
I said it wrong. Then I said it wrong.
Let's drain the queue here and give people and get some other comments.
Our intention with this split is that basically we realize that components aren't separable. Components aren't separable. You cannot have, like, if you were going to say start from the ground up and we have no built environment and we're just going to design a transport stack that works like what we want TAPS to do, you would start with the features that you want. And then you would probably go and you would say, okay, for each feature, I'm going to build the components that describe those features, and then you might do some implementation optimization so that you're doing things. This is not how we got TCP, right?
Yeah, we are way off topic here.
No,
Brian. I'd like to get some other comments in.
Yeah.
I wanted to say, so the intention of the slide is that's what we had in our mind, because we thought it's helpful for us to write the text. We have that right now, and we would like to apply the same exercise for all the other protocols, so we have text everywhere. This is more an information for you, what we have in our head, than a question if you think this is right. So only if you think this is completely wrong, then you shut up and shout at me. But if you think that this might be helpful, then you know what we're thinking right now. And otherwise, we will prepare for a complete document, and I think it will be much easier to have this discussion if we have text.
So one thing that to me also is different in this definition is that this is asking not really what do we have, but what would we maybe like to have. And I thought when we started that the first step was to try and document the services we have, and maybe be able to agree on that and what those are. And then, of course, in the long run, we also want to, evolve that and look forward. But I think it may be difficult if we can't just first establish and agree on what services do we actually have today that we can select in the different protocols. And when I read this feature, I have a feeling we're already jumping to maybe the second step of what should we like to have that you could have tuned in these components.
No, agree. That's not the intention. That's not a redefinition. That's not a full definition. So probably the lower part should say, what should an application out of what we have right now be able to control and to know, because the interface is not wrong. So even so we have a feature, the application might not be able to control it right now. We are putting up the questions, because we're looking at all protocols and not only TCP, not only STTP. So basically you say there is a feature and potentially you could put an interface for this feature. It doesn't exist now. So, and then in the next step, we actually say, because we only have those protocols, we actually look only at those three features, because the protocols doesn't allow us to be any more flexible about selecting what you can do. But the protocols still have those, or the transport service still has those features. Even so, there is no way to disable a certain feature.
I would like to ask people to be concise, because we have actually this is the 5-minute item on the agenda, and I believe that anything of substance that is coming up here is actually going to come up again. But I want to make sure we get through as much stuff as we can. And if you're not satisfied, we can talk about it on the list. But
as I said, I think it's much easier to have the actual discussion as soon as we have text for every protocol in the document.
Yes, but you don't need to say that every time somebody speaks.
I think I have to say it every time somebody speaks.
Either if you do that, then we need to find another approach.
Ken Calvert, and I'm recording this whole discussion in my head, so I can put it in the notes later. But I actually was going to make this comment back in Honolulu, and I decided you were too far along, and so now I'm going to compound the problem by saying this, 2 IETFs later. So I used to do formal methods, and in formal methods you specify a service, an interface, which is abstract, and there's been a lot of discussion about abstract interfaces, and you specify an implementation, which is made up of algorithms. And I think some of the problem you're having here is a result of trying to split things into 2 pieces when there's really 3 pieces, okay? There's features, and I'm fine with that name, which is what the application cares about and sees. There are algorithms, which is the way that you implement the features, and you can specify an algorithm that says, okay, there's a number, and I receive this number from the other side, and then I take some actions. And then there's wire encodings, which is how you actually represent the information that you actually that the algorithm acts on. Okay, now Brian's right. TCP, isn't decomposed that way, and so one of the problems I think you're having is that a lot of the wire encoding in TCP, there's a lot of things, a lot of algorithms that are operating on the sequence numbers and things like that. And if you just think in terms of algorithms, you might be able to decompose this, and you don't have to respond. Just you can take that or leave it as you like.
So I hear what you're saying, but I think describing actual algorithms would be even more detailed than what we have right now. So that's further down the line.
To me, it sounded as what you just said, that you were saying that if HTTP had a particular behavior, which I would call a feature, but just because it wasn't configurable, you would not expose it as a feature. And that, okay, because that I would recommend that we describe that.
I was just saying it the other way around.
Okay. Because then, I think we should describe what it is that features, and then you can describe to which extent that you are today able to control, which features you're able to control. Okay, good.
Yes.
Sorry, came up. Am I allowed back in the box now? No. you throw me out, you get to stay. I actually came up here to say something completely different, but I don't think that would be productive. I want to agree with Ken. I think Ken said better what I was trying to say when I got thrown out of the box. I agree with you that actually then going and formalizing this and saying that there's the wire plus the algorithms, like splitting that back out, gets us a little bit too far down the rat hole in this document, because what we want to come out of this document is the features, right? The components are just sort of like the going through the messy what's there in order to figure out, distill out what can we do with what's there. So I think that the algorithms and wire encodings fit closely enough together into the box around components. We can kind of chase it into there, but you're right that the reason that we're still talking about this terminology a year later is that particular difficulty. I can sit down now. Do we want to go back to the text, or
what's next on the agenda?
Do you want to bash the agenda? Okay. So you're on.
What would be next on the agenda?
Are you saying that you've got you have a contrarian view? Is that?
So wait, remind me.
I'd be okay with that.
Yeah, I actually think it makes sense to flip.
I don't think anybody.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
So good.
All right. Isn't this working group fun? Aren't you glad that you're here? I mean, I'm sorry that we don't have free beer and sandwiches, right? It's like we can't all be Google, but I can at least try to provide some entertainment.
All right. Okay. So I am a bit torn in this whole situation in that honestly, what I think is happening is really useless. At the same time, I didn't raise my hand when there was a call for volunteers, and I do appreciate the work that you're putting into it. So useless is being too harsh, and this is just me being me, and I'm sorry for that. I'll take it back. It doesn't help the goal of the group, is what I'm trying to say. That doesn't mean the document itself would be a useless document, so I shouldn't have said that. Don't take it back. But not helping TAPS. And I'll try to explain that. So, okay, here's my effort in trying to explain what I think should be happening. And maybe we should try, so organizationally, maybe the right thing to try will be to finish this document off and have it as what it is, which I think is a nice survey of things that doesn't help TAPS, and then have a first document that helps TAPS and try to get volunteers again. I'm saying that, and I don't have my hand raised, and that's the problem in this whole situation, right? So but that is something we could try. Okay, I've been talking about a systematic approach, right, on the list, and what does that mean? See, this whole TAPS thing has a whole lot of arbitrariness. Okay, this is fun. So this is Naeem back there, right? I sent him a message to come here because I wanted to ask him before this presentation if he would volunteer. So now I have a choice of just saying, okay, you're too late, you volunteer. Okay.
You've shown he's got good timing.
Yeah. Right. So it's very hard to reduce the amount of arbitrariness in the TAPS process because of all the discussion we're having, right? What is a feature? What constitutes a feature? Where does the line go? What is, what should be a service and so forth? And we can spin this forever, or we can just try to, reach an end very soon. Yeah.
Joe Hildebrand, I wanted to agree with you here.
Yeah.
And say what's not important, at least with my IAB hat on, as inputs to Stack Evo, the things that are important to us is that we capture the information we know, not that it is dissected into the smallest number of buckets possible.
don't care that much about being an input to Stack Evo at this point. Sorry for saying that. Sorry for saying that. This is like, yeah, sorry. Sorry. I have to say that. I mean, you know, there's a charter, right? I'm trying to fulfill a charter. I think that should be the goal of the group, right?
So, Gary Fairhurst.
I think that is maybe the origin of the problem. But,
it's okay,
yeah.
I can agree with everybody on this. But I do think you say this is not important for TAPS. The problem is we don't have this document. We don't have this view of how we put the IETF protocols together. Making that view is a useful thing, and it probably is a useful input to Stack Evo.
Right.
And it's useful to us because we finally get some words to describe what we're doing. But it unfortunately has delayed the process by about 6 months of getting to where we need to be. That's my take. So I still think this document is important. That's why I'm offering to edit it. But it's not quite the input to TAPS that I imagined when we started.
Yes, and it may be a good input to TAPS Evo, but it's about TAPS goals here, right?
You're going to make a counter proposal for the document you think is needed, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
see it.
Yeah, didn't want to volunteer for it. Anyway, yeah, so, okay, we can go to the next slide. All right.
Can we let Michael make his...
I'd like to make my point and then tell me about it. I think it's easier.
Good.
All right. So the first goal of TAPS, right, according to the charter, is to get this list of services. So when we talk about these services, there are a couple of examples that we always talk about, like reliability, ordered, unordered delivery, error detection, checksum, and so forth and so forth, right? So the first goal is to get a list of those. Then later on, we would make that list smaller, and then we will build a system and application can pick among these things. I think that's something that we, I hope, agree on, right? That's at least also what the charter says, using similar examples. There are two major problems that I see here. One is on how do we agree what a service is and what not, where do we draw the line? We said that already. Another problem, and that's I think a real issue that's going to burn us later, is that these things are heterogeneous in how an application uses them, right? Some things are dynamic, some things are static, some things can be picked only once. So how are we going to expose them? And the reason I say this document is a problem, or I see a problem here, is that this decision, well, I mean, what we end up doing is postponing these decisions. And then in the end, we have a shorter list of what was before a longer list of things that cannot really help in building a system. And that's actually my concern. So that's on the next slide. So how do we agree what is a service, right? Is ECN a service? Is SEC a service? Is packet erasure coding a service? Is flow control a service?
No. Next.
Okay, yeah, right. Good to hear that okay. But this is close to agreement in that, okay? What I'm thinking, I think that listing components, you're all on the list that you think this cleans it up. I don't.
These are not components.
Yeah. I didn't say that, but I said that listing components isn't going to make decisions about these things easier. I don't believe that. What is now exposed to applications, according to existing RFCs, has come through IETF discussion already, right? And I think we had a problem in the discussion because the discussion started with TCP, because TCP has got a lot of things composed into it, and you can't turn them off, right? You have it all on. Whereas if you look at SCTP, it consists of a lot of things, can do everything that TCP can do, it can do more, but a lot of the things it can achieve is by being able to turn things off. So just if you would go through the list of features that, or whatever you want to call it, that SCTP provides in its in its API, and would look at what is turned on and off, you're probably almost done, because SCTP is a protocol that has pretty much like tons of stuff in it anyway already, right? There's like a handful of things that some other protocols add, and my theory that would be quicker, as we think. And my point is, I don't want to impose that on you because I know you don't want to do that, and as I said, I appreciate the voluntary work, but I think we need a document that does that.
Impose on me. So I mean, I'm an editor of the document. I serve at the pleasure of the chair, right? So we can discuss about the structure of whatever document comes out of this, but I don't think that's an interesting discussion to have right now. I think I want to talk about more about. I want to see your problem too. Unless. So let's
okay. Let me try to finish because it's pretty short. Can I try to finish it because it's pretty short? I'm almost done anyway. So
we can go back. Yeah.
So the other problem is that the services are heterogeneous in how applications use them, right? I tried to show some categories by putting them in what I thought is the second draft. Functional versus non-functional was a name I gave to some things. Static versus initialization versus dynamic, single-sided versus both-sided. This functional, non-functional thing, whether you like the name or not, but I think that's a very important thing because that is, it's a subtle thing. It's that so the things we call functional here would be things that, not things that an application cannot get unless it specifies, but it's a difference there. Services that can never be provided unless you talk to the application. Unordered delivery is a service that you just never can provide unless the application knows about it or the application is going to break, right? And that's just a handful of things, right? So if we have this categorization down, then we can simplify things a lot, which will, in the end, allow us to automatize things better. So considering these is going to be necessary for document 2, the thing is that these things are visible in the APIs, right? If you go through APIs, you see that certain things can be turned on and off per message in HTTP, certain things are per initialization, and so on and so forth. Yes?
He's got one more slide.
Yeah,
I'm waiting.
actually.
Okay. I'll take it all in. Okay.
Okay, it's almost over. Yeah, okay. Next. I think that is the last, except the slide saying question answer. So all my concern is if we don't do that, right? Doc 1 is going to contain reliability, order, unordered delivery, these things, right? Doc 2 is going to be a shorter list with some hints saying, oh, protocol XY does this, protocol Z does that. Then we're going to try to build a TAP system how. Right? So my point is, if we end up postponing these decisions about what is dynamic, what can be provided on one-sided only, and so on and so forth, and we shouldn't do that. That's it.
So, Kevin Fall, CMU. I disagree with pretty much everything you've said.
Okay.
If you go back to a couple of I mean, it's a good effort, however. Slide. To me, that first question, we don't have to directly address this, although it would be nice to, but it would take a long time. The first one, I think you'd get general consensus in here about which of those would be a service. The next one, I don't see that to be true at all. I mean, what is exposed to apps? Yes, it's been through some IETF discussion. That doesn't mean it's a service. Suggest to start with SCTP is totally inadequate for the TLS work, for example. I believe. You can prove to me otherwise. Next one. Maybe. I didn't. APIs don't work. They're insufficient because there are many pieces of function we could have that are not exposed in the APIs. So if you know what the protocols or their service abstractions can do, there are some cases in which there are no APIs available, and it might be nice to have them.
Okay, when I was talking about APIs, I was talking about abstract interfaces or like service definitions that
don't exist now.
Yeah, except
so are you
for some
advocating
protocols they do,
defining
for some
them?
they don't. Yeah, okay.
For most, they don't. Right?
Which is a problem. I agree on that. Yeah.
Okay. I agree with that one. That's right. I think that's kind of where it's headed. But I think it might help because it's already been apparent to me that there's differences in understanding about the abstractions provided by these different capabilities. I've already seen cases in the document where I think some statements are wrong. So this iterative process is actually the most current one, maybe not, I don't know, but in my editing of it. Yeah. And so I think that the results of this is, at a minimum, convergence in some discussion about what those abstractions are. That may be helpful for other things. It may not actually do everything you'd like to do, but I think some of the assertions aren't quite right.
Okay. And I'm actually glad if I'm wrong and we get to build a system that works. Yeah. I'm just concerned that we may end up rushing through a few documents that provide some lists of abstract things. Now we cannot build anything that really works, and then so if we can, I'm happy.
So I think I'm going to say 3 things. I'm just saying 3 now so that I can remember how many things there are.
That's 1.
Yeah, 4. Oh, damn it, we're going to count. The routing meeting is over there. Okay. I agree with the goal completely. I think one of the things I'd like to say about document 1, to clarify the point that Joe made, is that the document is not the input. The process of building the document is the input. And I had always intended the process of the building the document to get us to the point where we said, oh, wait, that's not going to work, or oh, wait, let's go this way. And I think that probably your presentation here is one of the outputs of the process of making the document. It woke you up and pissed you off enough to say, let's do it another way. That's good. I'm going to replay, if you don't mind, publicly the conversation that we had at the social. If I can remember it.
I'm not sure if I don't mind.
No. We actually sat down and we talked and we realized that we don't agree, or we don't disagree with each other nearly as much as we believe that we do. And I think that part of the issue is that there are dangers in trying to build this system top down, and there are dangers in trying to build it bottom up. The gigantic danger of trying to build the system top down is that when you go from feature to component, you are going to make a simplifying assumption about the interactions among the components. Some of that may be simplifying assumptions about the interactions among the components that are not documented in any RFC, but which exist in the entire installed base, which is the reason to start with TCP. That will make the overlying TAP system that's going to do some transport protocol selection not be able to make any interesting selections, right? You have a whole bunch of framework that says, great, you're going to use TCP, but you knew that. Enjoy. Here's your TCP. And all of the other features that came along with the TCP that you wanted, you get them whether you want them or not. The danger of doing it bottom up is that we don't end up with an interesting, or with the correct set of features to be able to do interesting selections to an application. So my suggestion, it's the second thing, from a boring process-related standpoint, is that essentially both of these documents are, we have a document that's been adopted as the first thing. This is an alternate suggestion for the first thing, and then we could basically run both of these on a little bit farther and see if we want to say, ooh, actually no, we'd like to do something different. I think there's something here to this. The arbitrariness of some of the choices and how we've had to split the components up annoys me as well. I personally believe that because of how things were built, you have to make an arbitrary cut, right? You have to start with one arbitrary cut and then you have to keep going. I believe in the beauty of the approach. I don't think that it is going to work, but I'm not going to say you shouldn't do it. I think that you should. You think I'm wasting my time, but you're happy to let me do it. I think you're wasting your time, and I'm happy to let you do it. Let's see what falls out. No, that was meant. I mean, like really, let's actually have each person that believes that has some belief that the thing is going to lead to something that's going to be useful do that thing and show it. I mean, that's why we work in groups.
So you just made a proposal, and let me save your third thing. I was counting, and I thought you were already up to four.
But okay, I have one more thing to say. Okay. But that's IAB bloviation, so we can.
Okay, well, so save that. But let me just say, as the conversation progressed, I've said to a few people privately, and it's not explicit in the charter, so this may just be living in my head. But I've always thought of the first document as being essentially a catalog. It's expository. But I think we spent a lot of time doing synthesis of like trying to describe things as features and looking for common elements and trying to sort of reason about what we're learning. That seems like a possibly a very useful activity, but might actually be better living in a separate document, or maybe having a few people work on it independently so that we can see different points of view, because people come at synthesis from different perspectives. Along the same lines, I think Brian is suggesting an approach. I am willing to open up a discussion about whether we want to allow a few more flowers to bloom before we say, okay, we're going to last call this and we're going to push ahead, because I agree that this is sort of important groundwork for what we want to do in the future. So I would be interested in discussion on that if people want to raise it.
I'll leave the bloviation off for the next time around.
Okay, I would like to answer to at least one point. This concern about you build a system where you end up always having TCP. Because it didn't, but I don't buy that, because it's just about assigning the list to protocols. So it's just about saying, this and this and this and this feature together is in this protocol.
The
So
mapping
it's not
between the
more than that,
features-
right? You don't need to dissect it deeper and have a deeper understanding of how they interact or anything like that. It's just about saying these are in this protocol, these are in that protocol. And yes, if you do that, you get all the other stuff with it because it's the same protocol. But I believe you're making it much more complicated here than it has to be. But just
Entirely
looking at-
possible. That happens occasionally.
And that's
Let
why
me
I think it's
think a
wasted
little bit
time,
more
because
about that. I'm still not convinced, but I don't have a good example of the danger yet. Let me think about let me try and come up with an example of the danger.
Okay.
God, if I was trying to remember where I was when I started. Okay. I think it's quite feasible that this first document is the catalogue and its interpretation and its overall meaning. I'm worried that if we continue to finish that, which we absolutely need to do, that we actually stop until we've finished it before we make decisions about what we're actually going to implement in TAPS to do simple selection of which protocol to use and the protocol mechanisms that go with it.
Wait, I'm sorry. Say
Okay,
what is your concern? You're concerned that we stop, or that we don't
I'm
stop?
concerned that it causes a pause. So we have a Gantt chart where we do this, and then we do what we need to do next. Because if we're trying to define how the transport protocols all interact and find common terminology and distill wisdom from it, and then we decide how to make selection of which transport to use, we almost end up as a research activity before we get to doing the protocol specification bit. I think we might be able to try Michael's thing in parallel. Try a short document without the description of what all these things are, because if it has all these things are described a second time, we end up in a real mess. So my proposal is assume one document is going to describe what they are, what the meaning of life is, what the implications are for the universe, and therefore how we actually get wisdom and do this correctly. Try on a separate path to get something short that kind of captures what we need to actually move on in TAPS without the descriptive text. Because if you start the descriptive text twice, then we're in big trouble, I think. So that'll be my proposal. A separate document without all the descriptive bits. I don't care whether it's the second charter point or the precursor to enable the second charter point. If it's one more document that's a short document where the terminology can at least be harmonized, it's a useful document, in my opinion. If we need 3 documents instead of 2, I don't care, is what I'm saying.
Same here.
So the
name, please.
no, just about you saying the second charter point. Please.
Hi, Colin Perkins. I think this idea of looking at APIs and the features that are exposed in the APIs and building from that, I think makes sense if the goal is to build something that matches the scope of traditional APIs. If you're looking to build something that can choose between TCP and SCTP and UDP and things like that,
yes,
I think that's a reasonable way of building it.
I think that's the goal.
I think we have things in the IETF which are called transport protocols that have a much broader API and a much closer interaction with the application. If the goal is to try and bring those types of things into TAPS, I think the approach you're suggesting will not manage.
Yes, I would hope that we can agree that this is not the goal.
Are you asking whether we're going to produce the one unified API for transport protocols?
Well, for RTP and SCTP.
Because I can answer that now without further.
No, I mean, my point is we have things like RTP in this document.
Mm-hmm.
And if the goal is to bring things like RTP into it, then this approach will not be sufficient. Now, maybe that we should be scoping the document down so we don't include those sorts of transport protocols. But there's this tension because the set of protocols included is actually a lot broader than the way you're suggesting we go.
Yes, that is another problem to me of the document. Which is okay when it's a survey, right? But
and as I say, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I think the approach you're suggesting building up from the
Yeah,
APIs
yeah,
is also
completely-
fine.
completely
but
agree.
They
So
don't
completely
match up with
agree.
each other.
So Colin, that is the difference. That's what one of the things that document number 2 is about. It's about taking a subset of the transport protocols in the IETF. And if it's too hard to describe, RTP to fit into that into that framework, you can.
Well,
you can put in something, right?
I think we can document what these protocols do, and we can document the API. But it may be necessary to say that to figure out where the split is between them. And I think we're possibly trying to do everything with everything. That's this disconnect between the two parts.
Right. Well, I guess that's part of the challenge of having step 1 be, do a survey, step 2, do a down select. And now you're saying, well, we know this isn't going to be in the down select. So, maybe if this is really hard, maybe we shouldn't waste our time on it. I think that's an entirely reasonable thing to say, But I'm just one voice here.
Yeah, cool. So I don't think the document is useless.
Sorry for saying that, but I did undo it.
Yeah. So let me explain. I think that no matter which approach we are having, we will at the end have a list of features, and this document will also have a list of features, and that's what we want in TAPS. And anybody who starts now working in TAPS or when the document is done doesn't have to read all the text in the document. It's not important for them anymore, but the list of features.
Without knowing whether they're dynamic or can be chosen at initialization or static things, or can be implemented on one side only, or so this is what this is mainly about, right? Shifting this decision along is going to make it very hard to implement anything.
Which decision? Sorry.
So if you have some of the things, right? Some of the things can be decided per message. Some of the things can be decided per connection, like in transport protocols, right? Some things can be decided like are just an inherent property of a protocol. Some things can be decided only once and then later not.
Yeah.
Right?
If you look at the current list in the document, it's not a list anymore. It's like it has several levels because there are dependencies. It's not that straightforward that you list those things and they're there. Probably it's even a tree.
But
we don't want to build the whole tree.
But see, this is about dependencies in how they are used by the application, which is why I'm talking about APIs, right? It's about what Brian calls usage patterns, different ways of using them.
But there are also dependencies on how they're implemented. They are also not independent on how they're implemented, and you can't.
But that doesn't matter.
That matters because.
That matters only in that it belongs in one protocol, and you end up choosing protocols TCP or protocol SCTP or whatever, or like that you cannot have this feature without the other feature.
But that's something you have to know to make
right.
TAPS shim layer. You need to know both.
But that,
so what? Yeah.
Okay, but that doesn't. Well, that doesn't require dissecting the protocol.
That's the approach with token because, and I think we got pretty far. So I think it was very helpful, and it took more time than you would hope because there are a lot of different people with different views in their heads in this room, and we all try to converge. And when we start over again with a different approach, we will have the same problem. Everybody has a different view. Everybody has to converge. Especially as not for every protocol there is an abstract API, so that's another problem.
That is a problem.
And the point I'm saying is, in both cases, I think we still aim to the right goal. We want this list of features, and we could, with both approaches, end up to the same list. Probably we will not, because there's some arbitrary in both the choices. We might miss something in both parts. If we actually have enough energy and time that we want to take the second approach, then we can compare those lists at the end, and I'm sure we will take things we didn't sort of from the one approach or the other approach. So I'm happy to take the approach to write a second document. A milestone can be addressed with as many documents as we want. However, somebody has to write it. As long as there's nobody who's volunteering to write it and has energy and is writing a document, it's not helpful to me to have this discussion. As soon as we have 2 documents, I think we will have a very useful discussion about what features are and what should not be a feature.
As long as it can be implemented and will work, I'm happy. I'm worried about that. So, yeah.
Diego Lopez, bringing some kind of newcomer view on this. So, the idea is simply that I guess that the question at the last question is precisely the key part. Is the group can make a very much detailed analysis of components and features. By the way, I agree with Kevin that calling them components and features is a little bit misleading, at least to me, again, as a newcomer. But it's precisely the practical way in which you build a TAPS system is critical. And for that, something like, not necessarily an API, a formal API, but something that following precisely this, call it management interface or whatever, looks like a very practical and as a main result of this, so as an application, you can have a list of what you desire without caring about the particular details of the protocol, which is, my understanding, is what TAPS is about. And this is I don't know how to call it, but is probably API is going to be too far away and creating false expectations. But whatever we call it is the application interface. Just forget about the P. Maybe it's not programming, but that's what, well, the people outside here should be expecting from TAPS.
So I think the next step here is to actually write this document and see where it goes, and basically treat both the process of making this document and the process of making the other document as input to whatever that list of features is. Because I think that there will be differences in the feature lists, and I think that the differences in those feature lists are interesting. They're telling us something about where the problems are going to be when you try to build the thing. Could you go to the next? I don't even know where it is. There's a slide where you basically, this one, problem two, this one. We talk about, the categories of features by static versus initialization versus dynamic. This is a difference there's a difference here in my mind between a feature and a component, because almost every one of these could be implemented in either of the three. Okay, so at initialization time, there's just how you set up the association, but all of the other ones, I mean, there are some that you can only set up at initialization time, right? So this is why TCP options in the SYN are such a problem, right? But that's a TCP component. That is an aspect of the TCP component that has nothing to do with the overlying feature of I want to be able to expose information about the latency along the path to devices on the path. It's a diagnosability, right? This latency diagnosability could be a feature of TCP that you can meet with the TCP timestamps. TCP timestamps, that's initialization time. I could totally think of another protocol that would not have that as initialization time, where you could basically do it. I mean, you can even, with TCP, you can even hack it and see if it works, and it usually does. So even this classification is confusing the difference between a feature and a component, in my mind, by our terminology. And so I'd like for you, I'm sorry I'm volunteering you, to go through the exercise of filling this out a little bit more, because I think the differences there and actually having a concrete list to fight about would get us really, really interesting information about where the problems are going to be building the thing.
And as a co-author of the current document, do you see the output of that as being incompatible with the current document and structure?
Not at all.
So it could be a contribution to the document.
Yes.
Right.
And if I may,
it just needs an author, Michael.
It just needs an author, Michael. It just needs a Michael author. Putting my editor of that other document hat on, I'd like to basically try and keep to our schedule as we presented it anyway, with respect to that document, to basically not gate it, but then say, okay, we're done. We're going to leave it in the working group. We're going to postpone the last call. We're going to get it up to the point where we're going to get it to Yokohama. We're going to do the same thing. Yokohama will be done. We can go off and do, that frees up some cycles. And if the working group wants to consider the input from this as an input to that document, as opposed to having the two documents together and have that as an input to the next step, I'm not exactly sure how to
I think
get all of the things.
We'll figure that out when the time comes. But the thing is,
but I think we can do this work in parallel.
Yes, but I want to be clear. We're not starting on the second document until this one is done, because if we do that, this one will never. I mean, by done, I mean mostly complete and mostly agreed to, right?
Yep.
If we want to shelve it for a while, I'm totally fine with that. The group is fine with it. But you can't have dessert until after you eat your vegetables, right? You're looking very unhappy, Michael. You need to find a co-author.
Gary first. I'm sure you can start preparing dessert before you eat it.
You can prepare the dessert at your home, but don't bring it to my house.
That's fine. That's fine. So I think we should do. I really think we should cook the second thing. And if it happens to not be published in the same RFC number, I think we should just publish in a separate RFC number. What the heck?
You're talking about
this is Michael's take, which is just looking at his particular view rather than the whole big picture thing, so that we can get some thinking done to get on to do action item 2 on our agenda.
Right. So my view is it's not going to be clear until we actually see something about how compatible it is with the other document, whether it's 2 documents or 1 document, or we swap one for the other. But I think that we won't know until we see something. But I think that we don't need to make that decision today.
And I'm okay with that as long as there's a possibility to publish them separately at the end, if that turns out to be good.
Because if the group decides to adopt it and want to publish it, sure.
Sure. Because otherwise we end up reconciling some small thing with some massive thing, and we just end up with so much inertia.
Yeah, or, it's an appendix or something. I mean,
sure. Or whatever, however, as long as it's an input, it's good to me, yeah.
Nikulevin. So I think we all want to end up something that's implementable. We all want to start implementing something, not writing this in this document. But I'm not convinced that any of the approaches we proposed actually lead to something that is useful in the end. But if we have started this effort already, put a lot of time into, and if we move on now and we figure out that was not the right approach, the only thing we can do at that point is go back and start over with another approach or give up. I don't know.
No, see,
exactly that is the concern that I'm having, right? That if we do it wrong and we don't if that happens, right, and we find we can't do it,
but I'm not convinced
we can't go back because
that your approach,
the group is over. It's just like everybody's going to remember that as an academic thing that didn't work out.
But I'm not convinced that your approach has a higher likelihood to succeed.
I'm not. Yeah,
Michael, that's a risk of this activity, no matter what.
Yeah, so,
and I mean, if there's people, and either they shut us down and then we're done and we failed, whatever, or there's enough energy because people really want and need it that we start over again. It's all possible.
Okay, I would like to ask that people go and worry in private instead of and let other have a different microphone. Somebody else take over. I suspect that we may come back to related topics in the rest of the agenda.
I would like to conclude by saying that this wasn't me proposing that this is the only way that is going to be working or would be definitely a feasible approach. It was me worrying about how we get somewhere. And I mean, especially I think at the last time Brian went to the mic, some of the points are really worrying. So yeah, okay, I should worry in private, but it is.
Worry on the mailing list.
Yeah, it isn't as easy, right? I may have made it look easier than maybe it is. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Context shift, everyone. Saw that. Okay, so like I said, some of these topics are going to come back. So we have 2 more items on the agenda. Let me pull up the agenda slide. One is discussion of, how we're going to handle features, and we've been talking about that a bit. How much of a discussion of the features of transport protocols are needed before we can go to the second document, which is about taking a subset of the protocols, of the IETF protocols, and making some recommendations on how they can be combined. The other topic is, well, I'm sorry, we moved that one up, right? That was Michael's discussion. Do you guys still have stuff that you want to get feedback from the group on about the use of features? The previous slide was about walking through the refactored transport protocol components. I think Brian did that. Did you finish? Oh, all right. Well, do you want to do that now? All right. Was it that you didn't want the definitions? You wanted the TCP? Yeah. All right. Oh, it's a little Mac plugin thing. If you have two monitors, you spend a lot of time wiggling your mouse. And I'll tell you about it. Okay. Oh.
So basically the question that we want to ask here is, we took the nice, clean, probably inaccurate list of components out of TCP and turned it into a kind of bunched up, messier list of components for TCP. And this was the point at which Miria threw me off the stage, so I'll say it again. Because composing and decomposing transport protocols works really well for transport protocols that were designed in that way, and it works less well for transport protocols that were designed by accretion. And that's not meant to be a dig at TCP at all. That's actually kind of that's a very nice feature of we've been using the same transport protocol since before I knew what the internet was or even how to spell my name. But it leads to this. It goes back to the fundamental disagreement. I think that sort of the disagreement between Michael's view of the more top-down view of the how do you build features and the more bottom-up view of how you build features, which is where we've been starting from. So we basically wanted to ask, okay, who's read section 313 of the 06 RAV of the document? It's the same thing as in the email that we posted. Who hates it with the white-hot burning passion of a trillion suns, except for Michael? Because he hated it enough to actually like send slides. So of those of you who didn't hate it enough to send slides, who hates it? Okay. Do people see this as a more useful way to split things apart? Like basically showing that in the splitting things apart, some of these components actually are glued to each other in another way? Then, so I see Karen shaking her head as somebody who spends a lot of time on a nicely composed transport protocol.
Mia Kulevin, I'd like to finish a sentence, then just listing a thing.
Then just listing a thing. Then just basically saying, yeah, so this used to be like a much longer list of much shorter items. And it was like, you know, connection-oriented transport, bidirectional communication, stream-oriented transmission, this limited control over segment transmission scheduling. This was basically Nagel and turning Nagel off. Can you just scroll down a little bit more? Port multiplexing with application to port mapping during connection setup, right? So this is actually a perfect example, because it used to be port multiplexing, so you can have multiple processes on the same endpoint listening, with the fact that mapping happens during connection setup. So the passive opener in TCP then basically says, ooh, I got a SYN to a given port. I'm going to hand that off to this application. So then, what are the implications of this? So the implications of this is that it works with NATs, for example. So this shows the fact that these three things are kind of related to each other in a way that just saying port multiplexing, application to port mapping, and something about NATs wouldn't. Is this useful? Should we invest time in doing this exercise for the rest of the document, or should we back out the change and ship it?
So this seems like a lot of work to me.
It is.
And can you give me a concrete example, because I'm a concrete guy, of what you will be able to do with this information that's in the scope of the charter, that you what the value add is, because I'm not able to connect the dots here.
Okay. The value add is that basically when you take these things and then project the features out of them, you will be able to see which features are unrelated in a way that you could actually have them as different things to select a composition of transport protocols, or are related in such a way that you would never be able to split them apart.
So you're saying you're not able to do this just by analyzing the features, that you have to do this bottoms-up analysis?
So this gets back to the point that I made to Michael's slide, that I think you can do it either way. I think you can do it either way, but if you start from the features and work down, then it helps to have a reference that basically gives you some information about the relatedness of those two things, as opposed to then going down to the bottom and then going through the thought process. Right. The point of this is we want to basically throw up warning flags as to these things don't split apart as well as we might like them to early. That's the point of this. And I would actually be happy as the person signing up to do an enormous amount of this work, or one of the people signing up to do an enormous amount of this work. I would be happy if the working group said, this is useless, go back and give us the short thing. But I don't think that the short thing captures the possible pitfalls in a way that the big ugly thing does. I'll confess, Mary and I, we really wanted on Tuesday to sit somewhere and try to do this exercise for SCTP, because I think SCTP would look a lot less messy. Because what this mess might be capturing is the fact that we're looking at a thing that was not built as a composition of features, whereas SCTP much more was. But I'm going to defer to somebody who has much more SCTP experience than I do.
Yeah, well, yeah. Starting with something else, I mean, I both like and dislike what you've done here with the TCP components. I like that there are some more details, because, okay. But on the other hand, I don't like that some of the details, I think that they're a bit too random, and so...
I don't like the randomness of this list either.
No, and there's some examples here. I mean, you try to describe something about how you get a good latency out of fast retransmission. I don't think it belongs here.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, so on the one hand, I do like some of it, but I don't like this particular version of it.
Okay, so you'd like something between this and the way that it was before.
Well, I would...
Don't go all the way down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, or I would like an even more comprehensive description and then an isolation of the features. Or if you want to do this, yeah.
Would you be willing to help to illustrate what you think is the right way to do this for SCTP?
Yes, I mean, we could try to do this for the SCTP, but I would also say that I mean, the issues that you have here, I mean, I don't agree with that SCTP is a lot less messier than TCP, because most of the things here are exactly the same for TCP as they are for SCTP as they are for TCP. So, but then there are some more modular features in SCTP that makes it more simple. But I mean, there are some of these qualifications that you make here. Also, this port multiplexing. I mean, port multiplexing to begin with was not done because of NAT. It is done for a different purpose.
Yes, of course.
And so I'm not really sure why NAT comes in here. I mean,
because application protocols without port numbers don't work on the internet.
Yeah, I do understand why NAT comes in terms of the port mapping, but why does it come in as the advantage of port multiplexing here? I mean, that's the randomness I don't like about it.
I understand.
Yeah, so, but then you agree with the approach that there should be a little bit more descriptive text, and those things are not separable, but the text itself needs review. Sure, that's the first version, and we want people to review it and give us input and make proposals how the text should change.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you adding some details, but I do dislike some of the details that you're adding.
Okay, would you be able to propose an equivalent section for SCTP so that we could see kind of where either that or just propose edits to the TCP side? I mean.
Yes, I would.
Okay,
be
cool.
willing to do that.
Thank you.
I'll probably see if I can get Michael to help me, but
okay. Yeah,
we'll see about that.
Let the minutes show that Michael nodded almost imperceptibly.
Hi, Colin Perkins. I kind of wonder about the level of detail here. It's not clear. It's not clear what you can do with this level of detail.
That's what I was asking.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, it's good that you've decomposed things this far, but how does it? I wonder how it helps going into this much specifics, this much breakdown.
So again, okay, do you want to take another stab at answering this?
I understand everybody going to the mic and say, why don't you just do this? Because what we want to have is the thing at the end. But just, looking at the protocol and then making up a list where everybody's happy is not possible. So we took this intermediate step to actually get to something useful. And I had the feeling that this intermediate step had much less discussion or people being concerned about what we're doing than just listing things where there was immediately a lot of rejections where people saying like, you're missing this or this shouldn't be there. But explaining a little bit more was actually helpful to get it to the right point. And only if you sit down and try it, you will see how difficult it is.
No one has said it's easy.
And now I have to say my sentence again. I really would like to do this for all the protocols, write it down, have a first version, then discuss about the text that's there, then discussing about what could or may or should or whatever.
Lars, I gotta understand. So if we can't even get this right for TCP, which we all understand extremely well, why is it harder? So adding other protocols to this is not going to make this easier. And if we can't do this because it's hard, then. So I don't understand why you're saying we need more text for other protocols.
TCP is the hardest case because it has grown over time, and there has been things exposed to the application, and some things didn't expose, and some things are coupled, and which could be separated but are not. And like TCP is the most mess. And we should have probably started with a different example and come at the end to TCP where we actually have all the knowledge of the other protocols, and then see, okay, that's the part in TCP we have to describe.
Colin Perkins. So maybe I'm just missing something very fundamental about this document, but TCP struck me as the easy case. I thought TCP was the trivial one, and all the rest were the hard cases, because they did all the fancy things. TCP is just a reliable ordered byte stream.
Where we create a new area for you, and suddenly you're...
I think that was a request to close the TCPM working group.
I'm perhaps missing the point of what this document's doing, but I thought the point was to explain the interface it gave to the higher layers and the features visible to the higher layers. And there's a lot of stuff in here which is very good at explaining how TCP works, but it's not clear how relevant it is to the things sitting above TCP.
The point of the document, as I understood it, and maybe we need to go back to the charter at this point.
Come on.
The point of the document, as I understood it, was essentially to look at how the current described by IETF standards transport protocols are composed, from which we can derive a list of features.
So I was expecting that reliability would be a feature, and how reliability is achieved is an implementation detail. And this seems to be focused on the implementation details.
So, well, because these are the components are all about the implementation details. The next step is the features.
Okay, so I think you're doing it backwards, which is why it's so hard.
I mean, that's the case. That's the discussion at the beginning. Reliability might be a feature, but is it full reliability? Is it partial reliability? What is it? And we don't know. That's why we take this approach.
Yeah, I don't think reliability is a feature. I think that's the fundamental disagreement. You can't.
But following up on that, I actually disagree with trying to decompose the protocols into components that are only there because they support a feature. I mean, for me, really, this port multiplexing is an example. I mean, what you want to describe is that TCP can traverse NATs. And then you say, okay, we need to find the component that supports that. And then we describe that. That component, port multiplexing, was never done there for traversability of NAT. So, I mean, I would much rather describe the protocol and how it works to some detail, and then isolate the features, services, characteristics that it has, with some pointers to if there's a component that's supported, so what kind of mechanisms that are supported. So I think that you're trying to do a decomposition that isn't in the implementation. And saying that, I think I disagree with that TCP is more complex than others.
Okay, so keep 311, keep 312, destroy 313, write 4 from the top down, and then attempt to justify 4 with text from 311 and 312.
Yes, that's how I would have liked to see. Because I think the other thing is too difficult, and it makes it wrong, because that's not how it is.
Okay.
So, I mean, some of the services are characteristics, but they were not components.
Yep. Okay. Keep 311, keep 312, strike 313. Replace 4 with a wish list of features that we might want to have, and then rewrite 313 to justify the mapping between the features in 4. And I have it, you can also just put a little box, this is Brian knows what to do, and I'll send you some text.
Kevin Fall. That was not easy for me to parse, so whatever all those numbers dependency might be great. I don't know.
Yeah, no,
that could be. But I guess it seems to me this is largely about what to write.
Yes.
That there's a lot of understanding about what the protocols really do.
Yes.
And the question is, well, what is the ask that's supposed to be in the document? Focusing on this particular one, which the TCP one, which has some challenges that have been identified, I think, like there are other ones in this document that have a different approach.
We haven't done the same.
So I'd just like to remind us that there exist other ones that didn't follow the same somewhat bottom up, I think.
We didn't follow, so we actually had already, we already had the sort of, it was also, I mean, like all of them have a little bit of a bottom up in that I can tell you, I wrote 2 and they were not done that way, really. So maybe you don't like those. No, sorry, let me start over. So when you say bottom up, you mean in this way we're actually going to go look at the components and look at the nasty.
The way this is written is not only some bits of the implementation,
right? It's
abstracted, and its implications and operations.
Yes.
So
which is not so that the sections that you wrote basically then just listed the components which were essentially candidate features.
No, I don't think so, because we have apparently a deep disagreement about what components and features mean. Because now I think you're using the terminology that we kicked you out of the box for before.
Okay.
So I'm not advocating kicking you out of the box again. It just seems like we're still caught up in what to write and what the definitions of these things are. And because we can't seem to formulate the guidance, maybe, as I think was being suggested, well, let's see what we have and see if we like one of them the best.
Okay.
Because I don't see another way to go forward.
Let's look at the UDP one.
Ta-da.
343. This is UDP. I think you wrote this one. Yeah.
I did that. That's fine. That was like 2 IETFs ago.
Yeah.
I even remember what that says.
Yeah, but
all of the other ones.
TLS is too different.
Yeah, all of the other ones.
TLS is the more recent one. UDP is the older one.
Yeah, all of the other ones look kind of like this one.
This being
so
UDP.
All of the other 3.x.3 the component sections look kind of like UDP. And that they just have this list of things.
Brian is saying they rewrote the TCP one to illustrate a different way of doing the write-up.
Right.
So what is the guidance to authors?
That's what we're trying to figure out.
We're trying to figure out.
So the question on the table is, should the other sections be rewritten to look like the TCP one, or
like
vice
more
versa?
like this?
So then we probably should say something. Microphone, please. Sorry. Fine. So we should look at some of the other one, I suppose, and how it's structured, and let us say something about the style so that we can have some guidance about how to do it.
Well, since you wrote this one, why don't you talk about this one?
Oh, you're going back a little while.
You want to do the TLS
I did this the way I do most things, is try to describe it abstractly from the top down first.
Yep.
Look around to see what's there, and if they are relevant for the rest of the description, abstract them and describe them, and put in references for it. I mean, that's sort of the algorithm, and you can like it or not.
And this is basically how I think this is how all of the sections were written. We're just looking at that list at the end.
But the way that, for example, the TCP with NAT and for example is probably something I wouldn't have written.
Right.
And so it's hard for me to articulate why. It's just that that seems more of an operational thing and a detail. But maybe that's important. And so that's the question is, does that belong there or not? And I think that was echoed already. And I don't know. It's just a decision.
So that, to me, that gets down to, that's another rabbit hole that gets down to, the question is a feature deploys in the internet?
Yeah, this is
That's a question.
this is almost like architecture. You know,
Yes.
how do you teach it? How do you describe it? How
Yes.
do you know it's good? It's almost, I know it's good when I see it and
Exactly.
I like it.
So kind of what I'm hearing is we don't like the TCP thing because it's too arbitrary, which actually makes me happy because it means we don't have to rewrite the whole rest of the document.
That wasn't
Okay.
quite what I,
No,
I heard a little more.
I
Yeah,
don't like
it
it.
wasn't
It
that
was
it was
just-
arbitrary. I
No.
heard that there was a lot of there was detail
Arbitrary
being
and too
invested
detailed.
in areas that didn't actually help the document accomplish its goal.
Yep. Okay.
Which is to abstract the services.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, again. So I would wish that we have all the text we have, and then we make a nice feature list because that's what we want. I would wish, but I'm as an author not able to do it. Sorry.
So Maria,
Yeah.
the rest of the sections in the document, I thought were pretty good, including the table with the features in the back. So I don't see, you keep asking for more text, but I think the document is pretty good. I don't know what you think is missing. So Michael also raised he raised sort of a bunch of dimensions that aren't currently captured in what's in here. And that's a candidate for something to add, is to do that analysis on, single-sided and, functional versus non-functional, sort of characteristics of the features. That's something that could go in there. But I think the descriptions in there are okay. And I haven't heard anybody object to the other descriptions. I've heard a lot of, discussions of, what the definitions are. But it looks to me, the text in there looks pretty consistent on what's in the component section, what's in the interface discussion, what's in the feature section.
Can I ask a question to the working group? Would anybody have a problem if we basically just backed out that change to 06, went back to the old way of listing the features just so we can move on?
Michael would have a problem. He said, would you have a problem?
That was 2 thumbs up. That's a good way to go forward. Okay. Fine doing that. It's less work. I'm not convinced of it's not something that I care enough about to actually fight for the ability to do another 2 weeks of work. Okay. I'm not going to do it.
So I'm fine with it, and let's try it actually. But we might end up having a lot of discussions about like these 1 or 2 word bullet points where somebody says, "Why is this point here?"
Great.
And
that's what working groups are good at.
Over and over again.
And at some point we'll declare the end and we'll move on.
What I'm afraid of.
Yeah.
What I'm afraid of is that people are going to look at the points and not ask, what does this point mean?
So this document is really a tool for this group to get to the next document.
The whole point.
So the people who are in this room are the ones who need to understand what it means.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that are writing the text.
Yep.
So, you could say we don't even need to publish this document because it's really just a working draft. Yep. So I understand your concern, but I don't see it as being a high risk for the group accomplishing its goal.
Good. That's good input.
That's my opinion. Other people I'm willing to hear other opinions. Oh, you look so worried.
Yeah, because the only reason why we started this different kind of description was because there was a lot of feedback on the mailing list that said we don't agree with the list. This is not right. You can't separate it. This is the wrong.
You will not find complete agreement. Specifically in this area.
At that point, it's
my job.
I know, but at that point, it's just ignoring those comments and waiting and if they post it again or not.
No. The correct answer is send text. And if you don't get text, then they don't care enough to make a change. And if they do send text, then, we discuss the other text. And eventually we either converge or we move on.
No, in this case, it's at the end, it's like 3 people saying this bullet point should be there and 3 people saying this bullet point should be removed. And then we flip a coin.
Okay. Well, when we come to that point, we'll deal with it. I will help you.
Hi, Brian Adamson. There's a couple comments on Jabber that I think are worth mentioning. Sort of related to a specific observation I have, and maybe there's a middle ground between this kind of more deep dive input for the TCP part. But the transport provides an experience capability to the application, and that's one of the comments from Jabber is, what about the application viewpoint of what the transport needs to provide to maybe drive some of this content. And a more technical detail that my observation is that part of the transport experience for an application, even for UDP, is also ICMP interactions. And I wonder if anybody in the room, what's the room's take on that sort of level? Is that, when I signal to a socket and I sometimes get ICMP kind of feedbacks that direct.
You've raised a topic that I was planning on raising here. That this is something that I think might actually be missing from the document. I wanted to get some feedback from the group on this, which is we talk a lot about sort of the functionality of the transport protocols, but really, if we're thinking about an abstract interface, we've done a pretty good job of saying what does the application tell the transport, but there's very little text on what does the application learn about what happened, either through an API that you get a return from a call, or, with TCP, there are things that you can go and look at, which is because we didn't have, a very rich API, and Karen has raised these things in the past. And I'm wondering whether it is worth, and this is where our applications area brethren can be a particular use, because they may be working around existing transport protocol interfaces to get this stuff.
When I write a UDP application, if I have a connected UDP socket, I get a different behavior with respect to ICMP feedbacks that I get and that kind of thing. And I think that's a value that something like a TAP service can provide, as not the one that binds them all, but at least a little more unified approach to the API for.
Yep. So maybe a section in each protocol that is a description of things that applications want to know when they use this protocol.
It's a deficiency. Like I wrote the norm section, but I didn't really address those under the hood details that are definitely.
I think that's So can I jump in here and actually say the third thing I was going to say when I was in the mic line? Is that allowed? One of the things that we're coming to realize that we need to do with respect to the architecture is take a lot of things that have always been implicit and make them explicit. And one of the major problems that we have with transport is the fact that you have this very, very narrow explicit interface down to the transport, and a whole bunch of workarounds in library and application space to make assumptions about things that are implicit with the transport. And the opportunity we have with TAPS is to widen that interface so that things that have been implicit become explicit. And I think the reason, so you touched on the same thing, there's a little bit coming on, this came out a little bit of the ICMP discussion on the list, was also, and like the ICMP thing is that should all work and it just doesn't, mainly for implementation reasons. Mainly that's just like we can forget ICMP because we've already decided to forget ICMP, and then there was just this sort of this downward spiral of support. And that is, the interface has been so narrow for so long we forget to ask the question, what can I know? Right? It's kind of like, okay, go use the socket option and hope you're on the right machine with the right kernel and the right library. So I think we do need to add this to this application.
Okay. So Gordon, I just want to extend or revise my remarks a little bit, which is I don't think that it's necessarily something that you'd want to do necessarily protocol by protocol for things that are outside of the protocol interface.
Yes.
But there may be other operating system interfaces that are commonly used to get information about using transports.
Yep.
Well, okay, I have three things. Can I remember them all? I don't know. But I do remember Angori first.
That's one.
Was that one of them? Okay, yeah, okay. Okay, I'll get the easy one off my chest first, which is we talk about Norm as a reliable multicast transport. We don't talk about Flute. We probably forgot it. It's more deployed than Norm.
Who has text?
Don't know.
Ta-da! Everybody reading your email, you are now signed up to...
Vincent? If he's going to provide text, he can jump the mic.
That's right.
Vincent Roca, as a Flute cursor. Well, if there is a need if I know how to do this text, I can provide something, but
look at the norm text. Sense. Look at the norm text and say the same things that the norm text says for Flute.
Maybe. I can have a look and discuss with Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken, did you get his name?
Vincent Roca, author of Flute, co-author. Okay, that's number one. I'm doing well here. The second one, I didn't quite get all the ICMP stuff. I mean, we want to ignore a lot of these ICMP messages for good reasons, and TCP doesn't just arbitrarily ignore them. So maybe we should just write an ICMP section somewhere.
The output that I took from the ICMP from that whole discussion was exactly the point that Aaron made, is that there's this feedback channel getting information back up to the application that is missing,
which is
missing
useless.
from the layer and missing from the document.
But it's in 5405, so we can give you text from 5405 that talks about some of the things you want to do when you're connected.
So I do not. I can only phrase this as a question because I don't know the answer. But aren't there other things that applications use to find out about the status of their communication with the transport and its interaction with the network, other than ICMP? Aren't you like looking down and sysocs and and reading
of course not.
Value.
Yeah, there are. So everything's available via the MIB is generally available via the operating system, via
the thing is,
the
if we're
place
gonna-
to figure out what's going on.
But wouldn't it be easier if an application had a real API and underneath that API something else did all that ugliness?
It's called transport.
So the ugliness gets uglier.
something that TAPS could do.
One of the most common things is to attempt to connect to a machine that you assume is up. Am I on the internet?
Right, okay. I still stick with I don't know what, but I know a lot about ICMP, so I'm happy to try and write it if somebody else knows what they're doing.
I think Pete may have something to contribute here.
Well, Pete, I'm doing well here.
So Pete Resnick, and I have nothing useful to contribute here, which is part of the problem. So full disclosure, I have not written a useful line of code in many years. And part of the problem here is this group can't depend entirely on me having written not a useful piece of code in many years, and Stuart being the only one who probably has written a useful piece of code in years at the application layer. So ICMP, I think, is a beautiful example, because the last time I wrote a useful piece of code, I was dealing with a TCP stack that sent ICMP messages, and God bless my co-author on some of this stuff. We used to put up a dialog box that said, the application has received an ICMP destination unreachable message, and the button read, so what? You got to provide some semantics with the API, and that's what current operating system services do. And so, yeah, just saying, let's write something about ICMP is not the useful bit. Writing something about the system services that the application needs, and I can't make that list because I haven't written a useful piece of code.
So so let me ask a process question. As a former apps AD, do you have any insight as the right way to interact with the community that has some of that expertise to get the useful information? A joint draft or a...
Who in the apps area is actually going to use this stuff, because it ain't going to be the web guys, right?
I'm not sure I want to hear the answer.
You've roped me into a discussion here where I wasn't planning to say anything. My view on all of this has been one of incremental deployment, which is some enterprising person makes a library that they think has useful facilities, which they then evangelize to app writers. And they may agree and use it because it makes their life easier, or they may decide it makes their life harder. If you write a library, it has to be really, really well debugged. It's got to be very mature and stable to make an app developer's life easy. Because if it doesn't, it has bugs. Well, now they're hostage to your timetable fixing those bugs, which is why app developers like to roll their own. It's why Google Quick can iterate so quickly, because they find a bug, they fix it.
Is there anything that we can do to help those people? The person who might be writing that library? Anything that we can tell them about transport protocols or about the interaction between information, ICMP, I guess, since that's the example that we've been using, and transport protocols that they might not naturally know because they might not be protocol experts, they might be operating system experts?
I think the answer I'm going to give you is not particularly helpful, unfortunately. The approach that I see as being potentially fruitful, and it's not happening, is an application builds their own monolithic chunk of libraries that do the behaviors that they want. And then that developer writes 3 more applications. And after they've rewritten the same code 3 times, that's when the light bulb goes on and says, we ought to be making this a library.
And I'm not saying that in a facetious way, because predicting what should be a library and what is one-off is hard to know in advance. And quite often you can put stuff in libraries that nobody wants. Whereas at the point you have duplicated the code, now you've got an existence proof that it really is being used by multiple applications. It happens in various areas in ad hoc ways. Adobe's RTMFP was built into Flash. Apple has done things with GameKit, which is ostensibly a toolkit for making it easy to write games, which has been jumped on by a bunch of developers doing all kinds of app-to-app communication that aren't games. I wouldn't say it's been a wild success, but it is a layer above UDP and TCP and sockets that provide some semantics that applications want. So there's been some fragmented piecemeal movement in this direction. I think the survey of what are the various aspects that we might want, like security and ordering and flow control and retransmission, that's a useful survey. I think that's a good document as guidance for somebody writing one of these libraries.
So it sounds, so to paraphrase what I think you're saying is, we don't, there's not the right expertise in this group to really contribute in a valuable way to talking about the sort of operating system, transport protocol interaction outside of the protocol definition that we otherwise do. Is that what I'm hearing?
It kind of hurts to say it in those words, but yes, I think you're right.
Well, there's deeper expertise elsewhere. Maybe that's a better way to put it.
Yep.
Kevin Folgan, you touched on ICMP. I just wanted to ask that question a little bit. So ICMP having, first of all, ICMP in version 4 is a totally different beast than ICMP in version 6, because ICMP in version 6 includes multicast listener discovery protocol and NDP and all this other stuff. So I guess it's a sort of a, do you want to consider IGMP, group multicast joins, TTL setting type of capabilities
we
as
actually,
a transport thing?
I think, don't we have a line that says we're not going to do multicast control stuff in here?
I think we say that we prioritize unicast.
Prioritize unicast.
Prioritize.
Once we're done with unicast, we can.
Okay, that's just sort of it's a little bit of a warning that if you say, oh yeah, we'll do ICMP, there's a bunch.
I don't think that's
ICMP.
what we mean. I think we mean the feature of being able to get rudimentary information about why something happened at the network layer to your connection.
But my point is that ICMP today is a lot more than
Yes, exactly. So yeah, we would be talking about the services that ICMP provides in that area as opposed to ICMP the protocol. That's a fair. Thank you for clarifying that.
So, Gori, trying to finish ICMP. The reason why ICMP might be part of this is because I quite believe, until someone tells me otherwise, that to utilize ICMP, you have to know the state machine of the transport that sent it, because you have to verify that the packet you actually got reported was the real one on the path. And you have to sequence blah, 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 blah. So there's maybe a little bit of the story in here that the transport is probably the only people who can usefully use the ICMP messages. And from TCP experience, we know that the vast majority of these are simply advisory, which should be ignored by the transport, to be honest, because you do not know what they mean.
So what?
So the list is probably quite small. And we could write it. In V4, what, in V6 does it help?
The list is not small, or they're not advisory?
I mean, are there more useful control messages back from the network using ICMP in V6? Control error messages? What are the error messages from the network in V6 which differ from V4, which are useful error messages?
My point was that there are
I know about MLD. It's okay, I can look at an MLD, but I don't really, it carries other things, but we're talking here about how to help the transport interface. And from the transport interface, the error messages are generally not that helpful. So we can write text about this. I'd happily work with anyone on that.
Oh, okay.
So
do you want to see some volunteers?
ICMP. I'd like a few volunteers to help me.
Does anybody want to help Gori with a section on ICMP?
Cool. A lot of support there. In that case,
Michael put his hand up.
Somebody who's interested in writing about the ICMP state machine interaction with transports. No, you don't want to do that either.
Brian's operating under IAB rules here, which
fine, whatever. Right. Can't remember what 3 was. Oh, 3 was when we finally get to the end of TAPS, which is a completely different topic.
5 minutes.
We might have We might be building kind of flexible applications interface, or we might just be choosing which transport to use from 2 or 3 choices that we already have defined. So we can have a very different API there when we finally get to the end. And I'm saying that even just choosing the right transport might be a useful function. It won't please everyone, but I still maintain that is a useful outcome. Yeah. Okay, then I'll talk with him.
Okay, I think it's time to wrap it up. We're about out of time. Do you have, we have a few minutes left, Miria. Are you going to ask for text?
In the charter, do you have the charter text still there? There is this 2 words I've been ignoring so far and just want to ask if I can still ignore them, which are congestion control mechanisms. I mean, that's 3 words, but congestion control.
That was intended to include leadbat, and I think there was another, scavenging
I know.
class of service. Oh, but it's not in the document, is it? Oh, who knows about leadbat?
Yeah, I do.
Oh, all right. You do. How convenient. I'll introduce you to the document editors.
I mean, I can write something about that, but this is a whole. That's more. I mean, it's not to define congestion control as foreground or background. That's one option, but it's also other aspects of congestion control which might be relevant to the application or might not, or whatever. You can start a long discussion about it. Basically, asking if we really want this to have in the document or if we want to skip here. It's no problem to write text.
So I believe today the only way that you can get, say, leadbat or TFRC, well, no, TFRC is available in RTP, but I was going to say DCCP. You could put a discussion of it in there.